Let's examine the 6th, 7th, and 8th Amendment. We're going to break it down by its parts. We're going to start with the 6th Amendment, and let's look at the first part of the 6th Amendment. The first part of the 6th Amendment is that you have a right to a speedy trial, which means a person has a right to a trial that does not go on too long or start too long after they have been accused of committing a crime. So, while most people don't want a court case or to go on trial 2 days after they've been accused of crime, they want their lawyer, the defense attorney, to actually create some kind of case or evidence to show that they're innocent. They also don't want to wait for a trial for 3, 4, 5 years. So what speedy trial actually means is debatable. But most people would agree if your trial goes for years that at some point the attorneys can argue that your trial is taking too long and therefore should be thrown out. You haven't had a speedy trial. Let's just look at some things you might go to trial for. So if you have a court date when you get a speeding ticket, it's usually about 30 to 40 days after the ticket. And that's pretty speedy within itself. If you want to get an attorney to represent you when you get a speeding ticket, that only gives you 30 days to get ready. But if you have more serious charges, like you've been accused of murder or theft or some other kind of horrible crime, you probably want the lawyer to put your case together. But it also gives the prosecutor time to get their case together to prove you're guilty as well. Meanwhile, if you can't afford what's called bail, you'll be sitting in jail until the court date. On the other hand, if you are going to be sent to jail, if you could post bail, you get to leave and go home up until the court date. Now, the second part of the 6th Amendment is very important as well. You have a right to what's called an impartial jury. So a person will be judged by an impartial jury, or a jury that is going to make a decision after hearing all the facts. So when jurors are chosen, the attorneys, both the defense and the prosecutors, get to go through and ask the jurors questions. Remember, one of your duties as an American citizen is to serve jury duty. I've been selected for jury duty, and I didn't actually serve. I wasn't chosen, but I had to spend 2 days where I was possibly a juror on a court case in St. Louis City at the time. Now, they can't stop you from going to serve jury duty. You can't lose your job or be consequenced. You have to do it, and they actually have to pay you at least for the gas. It might only be like $20, but it's some money. But the idea is that as a juror, you'll do your best to make sure if the person's guilty, that they'll go to jail and receive consequences, and if they're innocent, that they will not receive any consequences, and they'll be able to walk away. Now, the problems with impartial juries is you have to assume that the juror knows nothing about the case. And sometimes that's really hard, because if you have a big case, like in St. Louis, for example, I read the St. Louis Post-Dispatch and New York Times and several newspapers, and I read about that there was a murder here or somebody's car was stolen or this or that happened. So if I was chosen as a juror, if I was for a high-level case, I might have read about this guy being tried for murder. So I've already made up my mind to some degree. If you read the newspaper, generally you think the person's guilty. You assume guilt. Even though it says alleged, most people assume they're guilty. So I would walk into the court thinking the person's guilty without hearing all the facts. I would no longer be impartial. So prosecutors and defense attorneys try to find people that don't know anything about the case. Also somebody that can be persuaded one way or another. That's truly impartial. When you have really well-known cases like O.J. Simpson or Michael Jackson was in court, then you've got a problem finding impartial juries. And lawyers can actually argue that we need to move the court case to another part of the state where nobody knows about the case, maybe Kansas City. They won't know anything about a murder in St. Louis. Or even another state if it's such a really big case. And that doesn't happen very often, but it can. If a good defense attorney might move the case to try to get an impartial jury. A jury that's going to look at all the facts and then make their decision. I like this cartoon on the right-hand side. It says, "Your Honor, my client would like to waive his right to a speedy trial." And the joke is that the client is a turtle. So, all right, we're not going to spend as much time on the next amendment. The next amendment is the Seventh Amendment, and it's pretty clear cut. It's gotten a lot more complicated today because it doesn't work or apply as well today. So it says in a dispute over a property over $20, a person has a right to request a trial with a jury. So if there's an issue with money and it's over $20, you can request a trial with a jury, which is very expensive and much more than $20. What you have to understand, though, in 1791, when the 17th Amendment is ratified, $20 is not $20 today. $20 would have probably been closer to $500 or even more money than that at the time. Now, on cases of $500 or more, we do have we have several courts. There's civil court where you can sue somebody, take them to court, try to get them to pay you out, and force the courts to do that. And also you have what's called small claims court. And most stuff goes to small claims court that's really low level or doesn't involve a lot of money. Small claims court will see situations where like two people are not married, they live together. There might be an issue. Somebody paid bills, or this is my couch. No, that's my car. I get the dog. So you go to small claims court. It's about $100. You pay the $100, and then the judge decides, and the courts will make sure that the police officer enforce that you get paid if you win the case. My cousin, for example, had made a deal where he signed for a warehouse for over a year, and he had to give the guy the money for a year up front. However, it said that in his contract that after 6 months he could leave if he didn't want to use the warehouse anymore. So the guy refused to give him his money back. So my cousin paid $100. He went to small claims court, and he got the money back. The judge said, yes, you're correct. It says it in the contract. So if you ever sign a contract with somebody about an apartment and they won't give you money or they won't let you out of your lease, or the other way around, somebody didn't pay you and you're a landlord, you'd probably go to small claims court. So issues over $20. You can request a jury, but that would take a lot of time and very expensive, and there's going to be costs that you're going to have to pay, called court costs. So let's move on to the Eighth Amendment. Now, the Eighth Amendment can be a very heated and hot topic. The first part, not as much of a hot topic. It says a judge cannot require you to pay excessive bail or more money than a person could possibly afford. And this gets interesting because excessive is not really clear. It's also contingent, which means it depends on how much money the person makes, how bad is the crime. So, for example, Arnold Schwarzenegger got in trouble, and I'm making this up. Arnold Schwarzenegger stole a Humvee car, and he really likes Humvees. And Arnold Schwarzenegger is this huge celebrity. He's in movies and everything else, and he's making millions and millions of dollars. So the judge sets bail at $5,000. Is that a good bail or an acceptable bail? And the answer is probably no. $5,000 to Arnold Schwarzenegger might be like a nickel. Or Bill Gates is a billionaire. And you give even $1 million bail would be like him flicking you a nickel. It's not much of his money at all. Now, on the other hand, if you have this construction worker that makes $25,000 a year and they're accused of stealing a car, and the bail set at $1 million, is that excessive? And the answer is probably yes. Because if crimes that are not violent, generally the bail is set at a reasonable amount. But it might be $100,000, which is still a huge amount of money. But the idea is that the person could actually be able to pay the amount of money. Now, in certain cases that are very violent or there's a danger to the rest of the people, the judge can actually deny bail. So, for example, Jeffrey Dahmer had actually eaten or hurt people and killed people, young boys, and eaten them. His bail was probably really expensive, and then it turned into he could not get bail at all, meaning he had to sit in jail until the time of court. So bail is money that you have to pay that says you're going to show up in court, and you get it back when you show up in court. Now, there's some other things that have changed over time. Now we have what are called bail bondsmen and bounty hunters, and that changes the whole game. So if you skip out on court, like you leave town, you're not going to go to court, the police will charge you with that as well as the crime. But most people do not generally have enough money to pay bail. So while the construction worker does not have $100,000, they might be able to get enough money to pay what's called a bail bondsman. And a bail bondsman is a person that for a percentage of your bail, and they get to keep it, they will pay the difference and lend you the money. And if you don't skip and you go to court, they get all the money back. So if the construction worker got in trouble for stealing a car, and he owes $100,000, he'll go to the bail bondsman. The bail bondsman says, I need 5 to 10% of the money now. It's usually 5 to 10%. So you give him $5,000. Now, the guy might be able to come up with $5,000. He gives it to the bail bondsman. They pay the rest of the money. They give him $100,000 to the jail or to the judge to hold on to. Now, who's liable for the $100,000? It's the bail bondsman. So what happens is if you leave town and you don't show up in court, does the court get to keep the money? And the answer is yes. So the bail bondsman his job is to make sure you show up in court. And they usually will hire like a bounty hunter. And sometimes bail bondsmen are bounty hunters. And you've probably seen that show where it's about bounty hunters where they chase people down, they grab them, they make them go to court. So if you leave St. Louis, you go to Kansas City, you try to hide out, they're going to try to track you down and be like, hey man, you need to go to court so I get my money back. And if it's a lot of money, you're going to see even more what are bounties, so amount of money the person will pay as a reward to get that person back to make sure they go to court. So excessive bail is relative and depends on how much the person makes and the crime they committed. Extreme crimes, you cannot get excessive. You might not have bail at all. You might have to stay in jail until the trial because you might hurt somebody. Now, the last part of the Eighth Amendment is very, very controversial. The political parties usually divide on this pretty clearly. There are people on each side that feel strongly about the other way. But this amendment protects people from cruel and unusual punishment or being tortured before or after they have been accused of committing a crime. So this is where the debate comes in. What's cruel and what's unusual punishment? And that's why I have a picture of Iron Maiden at the bottom left-hand corner, which was these knives, and they would squeeze it in on you, and it would hurt, and it would kill you. And no, we agree that that is cruel and unusual. But on the right-hand side at the bottom, you have a picture of an electric chair. And the electric chair has kind of gone out of style lately. Not many states use it anymore. And we're talking about capital punishment. Capital punishment is killing people for killing other people or hurting other people. It's murdering people for murdering other people. And this is a really debated topic. So on one side, you're going to have the Democrat Party members who generally think that capital punishment is wrong, and it sends a bad message to children. It teaches children and teenagers in the United States, the adults, that if we kill murderers for murdering, therefore murdering people for murdering is not really a bad thing. It's the right thing to do. And there's nothing wrong with it. So we're teaching revenge. But on the other, and also there's some other arguments that it costs about over $1 million more to execute somebody than it does to put them in jail for life in prison and just pay for them to stay in jail. On the other side, though, you've got a strong feeling for capital punishment. And they say, well, yeah, that's all fine and dandy, but when it's your mother or your brother that was killed, you want the person dead. And not all people that go to court want capital punishment for the murderer or the person that committed the crime. And this creates a lot of controversy because we've had probably hundreds of people have actually walked away from death row, meaning they were going to be killed, and they found enough evidence afterwards that they were innocent, and they walked away. One of the most famous cases was a case of a man, African-American male in Chicago, who went to jail for 17 years for murder. He was about to be executed. It takes years and years and years for them to actually execute you because you can go through the appeals process. You can keep talking to the courts and be like, hey, I didn't do it. This is wrong because of blah, blah, blah. And they have to hire lawyers for you. They have to pay judges to deal with this. And that's where the $1 million comes in. And also it costs a lot of money to actually physically kill somebody and to hire people to kill them, executors. So this guy, for 17 years, he sits in jail. A group of students from the University of Chicago pull up his case, and they see there's a lot of evidence that this guy is innocent. And I believe based on DNA testing, they provided enough evidence to the courts to reopen this guy's case. The courts looked at the case and saw that he wasn't guilty and that the murderer, I think, was actually in jail at the time. So he was innocent. 2 weeks before this guy was going to be executed on death row in Illinois, he walked away, an innocent man. Spent 17 years in jail. And yes, the state of Illinois did pay him money for his damages of putting him in jail accidentally. But this happened a couple hundred times. Amnesty International, which is a famous human rights organization, has argued that there's been about 35 or more innocent men or women that have been put to death under capital punishment. And capital punishment is argued by them as cruel and unusual punishment. Because there's some situations with capital punishment. First of all, electric chairs have malfunctioned and shocked the person but didn't kill them. That's going to hurt. If you've ever been electrocuted, could you imagine somebody puts 50,000 volts through your body and you live through it? You're going to be in a lot of pain. It's very painful. Firing squads have not worked and they didn't kill the person, so those are generally not used. Hanging is the person sits there trying to breathe and could go on for minutes if it's not done right. So, and what's seen as the most humane way to kill people is what's called the lethal injection. Well, lethal injection causes problems because sometimes people have allergic reaction when they take the medicine, and it makes them sick before they die, or it doesn't necessarily work correctly. It could even not kill the person. And one of the biggest problems we've been having in the state of Missouri with lethal injection is that the poison that's used to kill people peacefully is made in Europe, and the Europeans do not believe in capital punishment. Actually, America is the only Western nation, so the only country of the wealthy countries in Western Europe and Canada and America that has the death penalty. They don't believe in it. So in France and Great Britain, where they make the chemicals, they don't want to give it to Americans because we'll use it to kill criminals or people that we believe have committed a crime. Now, what's also interesting with the death penalty is it goes state by state. So, for example, in Wisconsin, you cannot receive the death penalty. That's why Jeffrey Dahmer, who had killed and eaten boys, was put in life in prison. He actually was killed by some other inmates about 10 years ago, but he's a very famous case where they could not give him the death penalty. So it's something to think about. What is cruel and unusual? One of the big debates today has been about terrorism, what's called waterboarding. So, if somebody's accused of terrorism, do they not have a right to the Eighth Amendment, cruel and unusual punishment? Can we torture them to get information and accuse them of understanding something when they may be innocent? And people have said, well, as long as it's not in America, once you bring the person in America, then you have to use the Eighth Amendment. You can't torture them. You can't beat them up. This also goes for jail. When you go to jail or somebody's in jail, the security guards or the jail people in jail cannot actually torture or hurt the people. They can go to jail for it and be in there with the inmates if they get found out that they're doing something wrong. So they can put them in isolation and keep them away from people, but they can't sit there and beat or hit or spit on or do anything to really hurt the people in jail. So if we're going to give that right to people that are in jail in America, what do you do with people that are suspected terrorists? And it's been a pretty contentious and argued situation. Actually, President Obama said George Bush wanted to keep what's called Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, which is it's actually American soil, but it's a piece of Cuba that they let us use essentially. We built a big prison down there. And he said that he was going to close it down in his first election and send the inmates back to America so they can get trial. And that did happen for some people. President Bush, who originally sent them there, wanted them to stay there. Now, as long as they're not there, they didn't get due process. They weren't getting court cases, or the military was going to deal with it. And there's been people have witnessed accounts of what's called waterboarding, and I might show you a video if we have time on that, where you put a towel over somebody's face and you dump water on their face and it makes them feel like they're drowning. Is this cruel and unusual punishment? Tying somebody up and they can't move, is that cruel and unusual punishment? So that puts a lot of things out there. What is cruel and unusual punishment? And you're going to find out people do have strong opinions that they're against capital punishment and other people are very pro capital punishment. The majority of Americans still today are for capital punishment, and that's why it's allowed in most states in America, including Missouri and Illinois currently. All right, well, thanks for coming, guys. Remember, so you've got the Sixth, Seventh, and Eighth Amendment. Sixth Amendment is speedy, right to a speedy trial. Okay, and then no excessive. And then Seventh Amendment is going to be you could take it to court if it's over. Take it to court if it's an issue over $20 and you request a jury. The Eighth Amendment has excessive bail. You can't make somebody pay excessive bail. And the second part of Eighth Amendment is what is called cruel and unusual punishment. So there's some things to think about. Thanks for stopping by. We'll finish up with the Ninth and 10th Amendment in the next video. Take care.